Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned it won't be easy to convince the European Union to accept a new Brexit deal. The UK is set to leave the EU on October 31, and Mr Johnson has made it clear the nation will be leaving with or without a deal. Joining us live now is Professor Benjamin Laker from Henley Business School. Professor, it won't be easy. That is one of the great understatements of the year.
Well, absolutely, and there is huge amounts of interest here, particularly with regard to the next 30 days. Macron has set Johnson the challenge to find the alternative to the backstop, something that his predecessor, Theresa May, was unable to do. You may remember she brought her dreaded deal to Parliament 3 times, and 3 times it was voted down. So if Boris Johnson is now able to rally the troops and to find a possible suggestion, we may finally, after 3 years, have some sort of resolution to the Brexit mess. But many cynics are simply saying it's not possible to do within the 30 days.
Well, the backstop has really become a symbol of the EU, hasn't it? And as you mentioned, we've got until October the 31st to find that deal.
That's absolutely correct. And it's one of the certainly toxic issues with regard to the so-called divorce from the European Union, because Boris and a lot of the Brexiteers and Boris fans were simply saying the British government does not want to put a border on Ireland. You may remember in '98 that was put out. That was the Good Friday Agreement. So actually, again, this is the EU trying to put further control back onto the British Isles. And from their perspective, a no deal, they want to be able to trade with the rest of the world, and having a Irish backstop in place puts that at jeopardy.
Look, he does it all with great bravado. He'll never stop. That's the way that Boris Johnson rolls. But it's a little bit like someone with a leaky roof trying to plug things in, because where he is, look what's happening in Wales. You talk about the backstop and Good Friday. You talk about Scotland. Well, Scotland's always been on the front foot. There's so much to do internally before this whole external thing can ever really work.
Absolutely, and it really is a constitutional crisis wherever you look, because even if you were to park the Brexit issue for one moment, we have a British Isles which has never been under threat as it is now with regard to being broken up. And actually, the Queen herself was commented recently, a question was put to her which she didn't particularly like. She said, how do you feel about being the final monarch of the United Kingdom? Because certainly looking ahead, Scotland very likely to finally declare independence, which ironically the first thing they would do would be to go back into the European Union. As you've said, Wales and England, there may be some split further down the road. And of course, with Ireland, we already know if there is to be a hard Brexit, there will be a border on that island, one of which will be in the European Union and the other half will not.
Well, you just mentioned the Queen. Prince Andrew has been embroiled in some drama. How do you think that this will all play out?
Well, certainly today we have seen the Queen rally round her family, and the Duke of Edinburgh has today been also joined by William and Kate at Balmoral. A lot of the press column inches actually have not been focused on Prince Andrew and Jeremy Epstein. They've been focused more heavily on the so-called war of the Fab Four and the controversy around Meghan Markle and Harry's uses of private jets. So actually, the bad news around Prince Andrew has come at a particularly interesting time where there's more potential interest actually in the whole airline scandal, and perhaps that's doing him a little bit of PR reputation. Many people, particularly of his past, have grown very tired, and perhaps the interest is just no longer there for Prince Andrew.
Yeah, certainly under a lot of pressure. Now, one of the top discussions, Professor, at the G7 summit will be these Amazon fires, where French President Emmanuel Macron called them an international crisis.
It certainly is. And actually, if you look at some of the stats around how much oxygen is generated from the trees within the Amazon, and then if you look at how many are being destroyed, it is a serious issue. And we have to consider things like Brexit are actually a huge distraction with regard to perhaps wider, more global incidents such as this. And it is quite a shame that actually some of the discussions at the G7 are certainly going to be focused on two issues which will not be the Amazon fires, one being Brexit and two, Donald Trump's potential purchase of the landmass of Greenland. And I think that is a slight concern, seeing as most of that discussion actually should be prioritised on the environment, as you said, the fires in the Amazon.
Just getting back to Brexit and the whole drama and Boris Johnson being in power, what is your, get your crystal ball out for a moment, how do you think this will play out? Do you think that there is a good possibility of going back to a general election? I know that there probably isn't an appetite at all to do that because there's been so much going on, but is that going to be the only solution?
Well, the crystal ball of mine says there will be a general election called in the first week of November, and that will be called by Boris Johnson. And the reason is he is pushing for a hard Brexit. I do not believe for one moment, as many others also would agree, that he's looking for a deal at all. And the reason for that is Macron and Merkel have made honest to the fact that they wouldn't really look to change much of the deal that was negotiated on by Theresa May. And many of the hardline Tory sceptics and those who support Boris Johnson want the absolute opposite of that. They want a hard Brexit. So what will happen is the UK will leave the European Union on October 31st. Boris Johnson does not have a working majority, so he will need to call an election very quickly, probably on November the 1st or thereafter, in order to bring a majority together to start making some decisions very quickly in the new world, such as things like food shortages, medical supplies, disruption around the ports of Dover and Calais. If he does not have the working majority, then many of the Remainers in the other parties are going to be succumbing and causing him great difficulty.